Hi everyone. This is Sai from LetsUpgrade. So let's talk about how to get your certificate. It's very simple. You will see two links in the description. Number one is the place where you have to go and mark your attendance. Marking your attendance tells us like, okay, you are a legit student who have attended this particular session. Link number two is your assignment. This is where your 90% of the priority is. You have to go and submit the assignment that is given to you in this particular session. Once you're done submitting that assignment, we will be evaluating that. We will send you an email. If you get the passing criteria, then only we will give you the certificate on a particular date that is mentioned again in the description. Please check these three things, and this is the way how you will get a certificate from Let's Upgrade. Number one, mark your attendance. Number two, just go ahead and upload your assignment. Check for the email that you have received it, yes or no. What is the feedback that you have received from your trainer? Number three, check on which date the certificates will be released. Thank you. Bye. All the best. Happy learning.
Okay, so we have actually come a long way, right? We started our initial discussion with the historical references in JavaScript. We then learned about what objects are, what variables are, right? How can we loop, how what are the different traversing techniques and whatnot, right? Now, this actually brings us to the final leg of our discussion, and in this part, we will be solely discussing about DOM. If you don't know what DOM is, don't be afraid. We will be covering DOM, what actually it is, starting with the very basics, and then also building a project using DOM manipulation and API fetching to demonstrate how actually projects work in real life. So this is going to be a very important lecture as far as JS is concerned, which is used actually a lot in development. This is actually the development phase of JavaScript. Okay, so before that, let us first actually see what DOM is before actually jumping into how DOM works and what all it offers. So I'll just make a heading. I'll call it DOM, right? So first of all, your DOM stands for document object model, right? This is the full form of DOM. So you should be aware of what DOM actually is. Now, as far as DOM is concerned, right, actual definition wise, what it is nothing but it represents a web page in a structured tree of objects. Now at this point we already know what objects are, so we should have a clear cut idea what do I mean by objects here, right? So I can say the DOM. So I'll not be using the full form every time, which is document object model. I'll be using a short form, which is a representation of DOM, document object model only, and we call this DOM, right? So a DOM represents a web page, right? So it represents a web page as a structured tree of objects, as a structured tree of objects. Now, and most importantly, right, your JavaScript can access, modify and update the page content, the structure and the layout of the page, right? So what do I mean by that? By this I mean that if you are aware of DOM and you know how DOM works, you can make your website dynamic, right? Because see, whatever you write in the HTML part, right, it is static. So whatever you write in your VS Code, let me take a very layman example. Whatever you write in VS Code in the HTML file, the same will be represented on your web browser, right? But imagine a case where the text or whatever text you write, right, in your HTML has to be dynamically loaded. That means you do not know what to load in this page. The data will come after the website has loaded. Let's suppose there's some data which is coming from an API, right, which we don't know while coding that how and what the data will be. It will come in the future. Or let's suppose you want to give a form, and wherein the user will enter the name, and the same name which the user has entered, it will be displayed on the website. while coding the website, you do not know what the username of the user will be, right? So that is a dynamic data that will come once the user has typed and once the website has loaded. So ever wondered how you can achieve these functionalities? This is done using DOM, right? So as I've mentioned, JS can access, modify, which is a very interesting keyword here, and update the page content. So whatever you write in the page or whatever has already written in the page, your DOM can dynamically access, update, and it can change the structure and the layout of the page, right? It can control the stylings, it can control the textual information, it can also add in new HTML elements dynamically once the website has loaded. So these dynamic elements are not in your HTML code but are represented and are displayed on the website using JS. This is how it works, right? So what I'll do, I'll just write a very simple code. Will explain you how DOM is, explain you the elements, and just see how the structure is laid out. Okay, so for this I will come to my JS. I'll comment all of this code and I'll come here, right? So I'll write a very basic code. I'll come to the HTML and okay, maybe I can comment this out and I'll write here, right? So I have a heading which says DOM, and herein I can write DOM example, right? So we have a title DOM, we have an example which is the title of the web tag, and yeah, so we have a heading which says title, which is DOM. And after this, what we can do is we can maybe add in a new class, right? And that class could be, just say this is an introduction to the DOM, or you can say document object model, right? So if I only run this sole piece of code, if I click on open with live server, you'll have something like this. So this is the title, right, which appears in the tab. This is the heading, and this is a paragraph which says this is an introduction to document object model. Now just see, I'll also remove all the comments from here. Now, so what do you see here, right? So first of all, we see that we have an HTML tag. This is a tag, right? This is a tag, and inside the HTML tag we have the head contains certain things like meta char set, meta name, and the title. Then we have the body. Now this body, it contains a title, and this body contains a paragraph, right? And lastly, we have a script tag. We can ignore this, and here the body ends and here the HTML code ends. So this is a code representation of how we, that is the users, view the page, and we have coded it. But let's see how does the browser interpret this using a DOM structure. So I'll come here to the whiteboard. So what I'll do here is I'll draw a line, and you can consider this as a hierarchy, right? So once we have the HTML, then we have the body, then we have the head. Sorry, once we have the first we have the HTML, then we have the head, then we have the body, and all of these stuffs. So what I'll do, I'll write something as, so first of all, which is the very first thing, it is nothing but it is the HTML page, the HTML main tag. So it is the parent of all the tags, which is nothing but HTML, right? This is the main tag. Now inside HTML, so if we come to VS Code here, inside HTML we have the title, right? We have meta name and meta cache. We can ignore this because this is not a part of what will be displayed on the website. We can just consider this title. So once I come here, so this is the HTML, and once I come here, we have a head. Or maybe I can take an arrow sign from here. We can delete this and we can take an arrow. Yeah, so this means which is inside your HTML, and this is nothing but head, right? And inside the head we have a title. So what I'll say, that I go inside the head, and herein I have a title of the page, right? So if you see here, we have the HTML, then we have the head. Inside the head, as a child, we have a title. Okay. Now once we move outside the head, we have the body. So as you can see, this HTML is the parent of all, and this head and this body are siblings. So this is in the same line, as you can see here. What I'll do, I'll drag this line here. These are the siblings, and in here, once we are outside our head, we have something called as a body. So I will write here body, right? So once we have the body, now this is very interesting. Inside the body, we have an we have a heading with the id title, and also we have a paragraph which does not have any class. We can maybe give it a class or an id. Let's suppose I give a class, I call it description. So let us represent this. So which is inside the body. So I'll go inside the body. So this is inside the body, and inside our body, as we have discussed, first of all we have the heading. Now headings, if we have a heading with an id, okay, so inside the body I will represent my heading, which is nothing but h1, which is the tag name, dot. Now since we are using a title as the id name, so it is represented by something like id, which is a hashtag, and I get title, right? So this is nothing but this says the text dom, so it will actually this tag will have the text dom. And similarly, we also have one more, which is a paragraph, yeah, with a class description. So since it is a class, it is represented by a dot notation, and this is nothing but a description, right? And this description says nothing but this is an introduction to dom. DESCRIPTION. I hope the spellings are correct. Not sure why it is showing this, but yeah, this is not of our concern. But again, okay, so this shows the text. This is introduction to dom. Something like this. And since this is going outside the page, maybe I can just drag the page like this. Okay, and lastly what we do is we end here and we start here, right? And this is nothing but this whole is nothing but this is your DOM tree. This is your DOM tree, right? So again, iterating, what is a DOM tree? It is nothing but it is a representation of the web page. So this is exactly a web page, and we have represented it in a tree structure, in a hierarchical structure, starting with the starting point, then the HTML, then the tags within the HTML, then the tags inside the then comes the body, then the tags within the body. And if the website is very complex, all the structure will be laid out like this. Now the interesting part is you do not have to worry about it. This DOM tree is internally created by your browsers automatically, right? You just should know how this DOM actually, what this DOM actually is, and how do we access this DOM. Since we know, once we know the working of the DOM, we can just access each and every title. So let's suppose, for example, tomorrow I want to change this DOM to hello DOM, and this has to be done using JS, not by HTML. So since I have the idea of how the DOM tree works, I can access this h1 title. How can I do this? First of all, I'll go to HTML, then I'll go to my body. Inside the body, I know the location of HTML. I can reference that HTML, which is the title, h1 hashtag title. I can get a reference of this title, and I can change the content, change the styling, or modify any of the stuff that I want to purely based upon using JS, not HTML, right? So every HTML, and most importantly every HTML element you see here, it is represented as an object in the DOM tree, right? So that is how we do it. So this was how, as far as how the DOM tree looks like is concerned. So if now anyone asks you what is a DOM tree, I hope you have sufficient content to explain how what is DOM tree and how it works. Okay. Now, after this, after we know how the working of DOM tree actually works, we will now see how can we access the DOM with JS, because as I told you, accessing is a very important part of DOM tree. So we'll see how can we access. So for this, I'll come to my VS Code and I'll come to my script.js. So in here, I'll call accessing the DOM. Okay. So now to access the DOM, you have multiple elements, you have multiple functionalities, right? Because as I told you, the elements in the DOM, they can be represented in many ways. We can represent a DOM, we can represent an element using the ID, using the class name, using the tag name, right? Any of those stuff. So let's suppose if I want to get a reference of this title, I have multiple ways. Either I can just get the reference using the h1 tag, or if I want to be more precise, I want to be more concise, I can use the title as my reference name, because deep down I know that the IDs are unique, right? So if I only want to target this h1 with the ID title, I can just get the reference of this ID title and access my DOM, right? So let us do one thing. Let us actually see how can we actually access it. So again, iterating, we have title, we have class. So I'll come to my script.js now. So if I want to access my title, so first of all, I'll store the okay, so I'll write a piece of code and then explain you what it means. So I'll do something like document, which is the whole document, which is the parent. And from this document, I want to get an ID, reference of an ID title. I'll do document get element by ID. And inside this, I'll add the name of the title, which I want the reference to. So in this case, I want the reference to my title ID. And if I want to, I can store it in a variable. I can say maybe, so since this was a header, I can say something like const heading equals to document.getElement by ID title. Now similarly, so we have the access. Now let's suppose if I come here, I want to change this reference or okay, this is the title, I want to change the reference. Now how can I do this? So let's see here. So herein I'll write change the text. Now to change the text, I'll do something like heading, which is the variable name which I've stored. And to change the text, we have another built-in method which is called as the inner text. So if I use inner text and specify the text, let's suppose I do, instead of DOM, I want to do welcome to DOM. So if I do this, as you see, now this has been changed from DOM to welcome to DOM. Now if you come to the HTML, see, it still says DOM. That means this text was there statically. It was there once we hard coded the data. But once we use the script, because if we are using the script, that means we want to dynamically load the data, and this is what will actually be appearing if we are using JS to manipulate the text. So if we do this, it will be replaced by DOM to DOM, like from DOM to welcome to DOM. This is how you can maneuver. And similarly, you can change any title. You can change it to whatever title you want to. You can also add stuffs like the font size and also styling. So I'll show you one more example of how you can add these stylings. So for this, if I do something like heading, so this is the heading name. We have an object called as style, and if I want to change the font size and I want to make it maybe, let's suppose 100 pixels, which is, I know, a lot, but if I want to, I can change this style as well. So as you can see, this has now changed to 100 pixels. That means we can also style our application using using JS. That helps us giving it a dynamic touch to it, right? So this is how we do it. Similarly, we also have an option to create elements, to append elements. You can also add elements dynamically, although this is not a lot used, but if it gives you power to add the elements as well, right? So this is it about how DOM works, how you can access the DOM, right? How you can maneuver the DOM. So once we are aware of how DOM works, although we'll do a project which will again be in depth how this works, but you should know some basics of it before jumping to the project. So one more thing that we'll be using is, since as you can see, we already okay, I think I removed the button. So if I, let's suppose, had a button, so I'll say button, and I give click me, and to this button, if I want to, I can give it an ID. So if I say ID equals to btn, so what I can do is I can also add an event listeners. So what are event listeners? They are functions that gets triggered once the user wants them to, or on some actions. So if I come up here, so first of all is I'll want to get the access of this button, which is btn. So I'll copy this. I'll say const button equals to document dot get element by id, and this is btn. Now if I come to the website, this is a button, right? And this button here, if I click on it, you can see there's no action being performed, but I want that my JS should listen to some actions which are being triggered when I click on this button. So we can do that as well. So let's suppose I come up to my script.js. This is document.getElementById button. I can do something like btn, it is button dot add event listeners. Now add event listeners is again a JS method which helps you listen to events, and what one such event is a click. So once I click on it, it will listen to an event and it can run a function. So this function could be any logic, right? So I can say maybe something like alert button has been clicked. So now once I come here and once I click onto this button, we have an alert box which says a text button has been clicked. Now what does this mean? This means that along with accessing the DOM or changing the DOM, our JS can also listen to events. Event could be as simple as a button click. It could be scrolling. It could be typing something on the keyboard. So these are all events, and JS has the power to listen to these events. As simple as that. I hope you got the crux of it, how it is and how it works. Okay, so now since we have an idea about how DOM works, it's now a good time to just do a demonstration of a project. So what I'll do, we will be building a project which will fetch the live weather using an API, obviously, because the weather data will have to come from an API, which will fetch the data depending upon which city or which state or which country you type. So what I'll do here is I have a source. If you type in open weather API, so this will provide you basically free APIs to test your skills out, and this is an actually real-time API. So if you come here to this page, right, you can come to, so if you scroll down, you have this current weather data, right? It has multiple other functionalities as well, like hourly forecast, daily forecast, climatic forecast, and all of these stuffs. But we are majorly concerned about the current data. So what we will do is we will come to this section and I'll click on API doc, right? So once we click on API doc, you will see a URL, right? This is nothing but this is the API endpoint, right? There are multiple URLs in this as well. So this you see it will take in the latitude and the longitudes along with the API key. Let's see if there is something else as well, right? So this is an example of the API call. We have given latitudes and longitudes, right? And this is the response that they are claiming to have. And if we scroll even down, so this actually tells what each and every value in each and every key in the object of the API means, right? And we have all these stuffs, right, as you can see. And if we scroll down, we have certain other API keys. So this helps you search the API using the city, right? I think this makes much more sense because no one will go ahead and search the type in the long latitudes and the longitudes. It is too much of a task, right? Whereas the city name is something which we can use. In this one we also have the country code, right? I think let's go with the very used ones, which is nothing but if you type in a city name, you will have the API. right? So what I can do is I can copy this API, come to my VS Code, and maybe store it somewhere. I can say maybe something like const API equals to this, right? And it also asks in for an API key. Now see, mostly every APIs, mostly majority of the API, they have an API key, right? And that key will be separate for each and every individual who is making a hit on the API. Right? Keys are usually just to keep a track of how many requests you are putting in and all of these stuffs. So to track in the API key, what you can do is you can click on sign in. So once you click on sign in, I think I already have my credentials. So once you click on sign in, and if you click on your username, you have my API keys drop down. So if you hover onto your username, in this drop down you will see a section called as my API keys. So if you click on API keys, you will have your API key here, right? If you don't have your API key, although you will have it majority of the times, if you still don't have your API key, you can click on generate API key. It will generate you an API key, and this is absolutely free of cost. So what I'll do, I'll copy my API key. Please make sure to add in your own API keys, not use my API key. I will come up here and paste this. I'll save this API key. Maybe I can just save const. I can just say const API underscore key equals to this. Right. So these are the important parts of this project which you need to gather. First is the API URL or the API endpoint. Next will be the API key. Once you are done with all the information gathering, you can now start to build the project. Now, so what I'll do, I'll come to my index.html. I'll comment out all of these things, right? So what we're thinking is we will make a weather application. That weather application will display stuffs like the temperature. We can, apart from that, if we want to, we can also display something like as wind speed. If we have that, we can also display the type of the weather, which is hazy, cloudy, sunny, or whatever the API key brings us. We can all use all of these informations, right? And also, before using all of these information, we'll want, because again we cannot judge what the user will type. We cannot hard code the data, so that so whatever the city or the country or the state the user types, that state has to make an API call, and that API will return a data to us, and that data we need to show it onto the website. So that data will be dynamic, because we don't know what the data will be. It will be coming from the API. So we'll use DOM to manipulate and access this data. So let's see. So first of all, what I can do, I can have an h1 and I can write weather application here. Now once I write weather application, first of all, the first thing is I'll be needing a form to give users the flexibility to add in the state names or the city names. So I'll create a form, and I can give it a class name. I can give, let's suppose I say input, and this form, it will have a placeholder just to make the users enter their city. So in this case, it will be of input type text only. I can make an ID. I can say something called as, maybe we can place input value, right, where the users will enter their inputs. And I can have a placeholder which can just say enter your city, right? It says enter your city. Now once we are done with the form, we can have a button. So once the user clicks on that button, then only the API call will be made. So for this, we'll be needing a button type submit. So if I say input type submit, and I can have the value as submit. So this is the form. So if I go to my DOM example, this is what it looks like. So in here we can type in the city based on what city we are typing. If we click on submit, the request will be made to an API, and the API will give us the results back, and we need to show the results somewhere here below, right? Okay. Now comes the display part. So for the display part, I'll make a div, because I need to have a place to display it, right? Although it will be blank, but I still need to have a place to display. So I'll create a div. I can give it maybe a class which is called as display, and yeah, and this class, first of all, it can have a heading which can just say the type of the or the name of the weather, like hazy, sunny, cloudy. So I can say class as name, and I'll not write anything here because this will be a parent which will contain the child elements. Okay, now we can actually decide what information we want to show here. So what I'm thinking is I'll might want to show first of all the description of the weather, right? So I can say, something like p and p class, which will be nothing but maybe we can call it description only, and this description we'll leave it blank because this will eventually come from the API call. Similarly, apart from this, I think what I have mostly seen is nothing but we have the temperature, and we also have wind speed if you want to put it, or we also have the AQI nowadays, right? But let's put the wind speed as well, or we'll see what all access we have to the data. Accordingly, we can update it if we want to. So now since we have this, we can now, so since this data is coming from an API, it's make no sense to write anything, right? Because we'll be writing it from the API call itself. Okay, so since we now have all the access, so this is how what it looks like, purely simple and basic. The data will be displayed somewhere below this form because we don't have the data yet. We'll call the data from the API, then only will display it. So now let us come to the script part. Let us actually build and get access to the data. Okay, so first of all, I would want that whatever the user is typing in the form, I want the access to the form first, right? So I can say something like const input value equals to, and in this I need the input value because the user will be typing the input here, right? So I'll copy this input value and I can say document. So we have seen document.getElement by ID, which is used to target the reference by IDs. We have document.getElement by class name, which is used to get access to the class names. Similarly, we also have something called as document.querySelector, in which you can literally mention whether it's an ID or it's a tag name or it's a class. So how it works is you do document dot and you mention what it is. So it is a class with the name, what the name was, with the name as input, right? So it is a class with the name as input. So I'll come up here, I'll place in the name as dot input, right? Apart from that, we want to get reference of these as well, which is nothing but description, temperature, and wind speed, right? So let us do one thing. Let us also access these are all class names, and this should be very easy. So what I can do here is I can say something like const. So first is nothing but the wind speed. I'll store it inside a variable. Wind speed is nothing but document dot get element by ID, and it is the ID name is what? Wind speed, right? So it is a class. If you want to use a class name, you can use a class name. If you want to use a query selector, you can use a query selector as well, right? So what would I like to do is, because since we're using query selector here, I like to keep it uniform. So I'll use a query selector here as well. Query selector, and it is nothing but sorry, not input, it is wind speed. Oops. I'll copy wind speed and I'll paste it here. Similarly, I can get a reference to the description and the temperature. So const description is nothing but the ID name, class name is description, and for const I would say temperature, the selector name is temp. We'll verify it once, description and temp, and it should be a class. So if I come up here, it is a class description and we have the class as temp. I think this should be good to go. Okay, now here comes the main thing, right? When should an API call be made, right? See, because we're using a form and all this is inside a form, and in the form we also have a submit button. So it makes sense to make an API call once you submit the form, right? So for this, since we already have access to the input value, which is here, I'll do something like input value. To this, I will add an event listener. Remember we did an event listener. So I'll add an event listener, and this event listener will be of type submit because we are submitting on a form, right? So I'll say submit, right? And once I submit, I need to generate a function, right? Just like function we have generated. Now see, you can also play smart with it. You can just declare the function here and invoke the function later on. It will look very neat and clean. So let's do that. So I will I will call a function, and this function could be named as simple as an input, right? We'll take the input from the user. So I can say input. Now if I come in here, then I want to declare the function, so I can just say function, the function name input, right? Now it will take in an event object, which is nothing but, event object is nothing but, you know, it has the reference to all the elements in the form, right? And here I will write the logic. So I will write the logic for uh, weather project. So in short, what have we done till now? We just made the structure of the web page, and if you see, this is how the structure looks. And in the JS part, we have not coded the logic, but we have access to all the tags, to all the elements along with the API and the API key, which will be needed to make this project. The only thing remaining here is now the logic of the weather API. So let us see, let us also code the logic. It should be very easy, trust me. If you follow along, it will be very easy. Now let's write the logic. So what is the first thing? The first thing here would be to catch the word, you know, which the user is typing here. Let's suppose the user is typing Andhra Pradesh or Mumbai. So I need, because that keyword will be used in my API, and I need to have, so that is the only reason I need to have access to this keyword. So there is a way to do that. So in JS, we can use something like input value or just value. So what I'll say document dot get element by ID, and this ID is nothing but input value. So whatever the user will type into this ID, because I have given it an ID, I'll have the access to that. Okay, so I can use or let's use query selector only, because we're using query selector all the time. I can say document dot query selector, and in this I will give which ID it is. So it says input value, so I'll copy the input value name. Now since this is an ID, I'll have to mention hashtag and give it an ID, right? And if we use something called as dot value, this will give us the value which the user will type, right? So what I'll do, I'll just show it to you as well. Maybe I'll store it inside a variable. I'll say const word equals to this, and if I do console.log word, you'll get this word, right, which the user has typed. So let us see. So I'll come to my application, I'll go to inspect, and maybe I do not, okay, so I'll type in word. Let's suppose I type in Mumbai, and if I click on submit, we don't have any name. Let's see, I'm inside the console. If I click on submit, oh, so as you can see, it is coming for a split of a second. So if you observe this carefully, if I write in Delhi, if I click on submit, see, it is coming for a split of a second. And I know why this is happening. This is happening because, you know, the default nature of the form is to just submit the data and that's it. It will not hold the value. So if we want to hold the value, we want to prevent the default activity of a form. So we have to do something like event.prevent default. So if we do something like event.prevent default, it will restrict the default activities of a form, which is just to send the data. It will not do that. It will just hold on to that value, because we are just doing it for a demonstration purpose, right? So now if I come up here, if I click on Delhi, if I click on submit, and as you can see, now we're getting Delhi. Tomorrow, let's suppose I click on Andhra. If I click on Andhra, I'm getting Andhra, right? So that means whatever the value the user is typing, we have the access to that. That means we are now one step ahead of our project. Okay, see, since now we also have the value, I can comment this out. I have access to this value. Now the next step is to nothing but make an API call, right? So for making an API call, the very commonly used function to make an API call is nothing but the fetch, right? If in JS we have a fetch method, if you use fetch and you mention the URL of the API, it will help you fetch that API. So since I already have the API, I'll copy this and I will place it here. Now remember, if you notice, you have the city name. Now the city name is actually nothing but the word, right, which the user will be typing. So this word will actually will have to be concatenated into the URL. So for this, we can use something called as a backtick. We can use a backtick here, and the city name is a JS variable, right? So if you want to include a JS variable inside a string, we use a backtick, and then what we do is we use a dollar sign, and we use something called as the word name which we want to fetch. So in short, if in a string you want to include a JS variable or a JS functionality or a JS anything related to JS, it has to be done using the word. Because if I only add a string word, just like if I add strings here, this will be treated as a string, but I don't want to treat it as a string. I want to treat it as a word. So I use a backtick and use it here. Similarly is the case of API. Since I already have API key, I can mention the API as API key. So I'll mention dollar, and instead of this I'll write API key, right? So this is now my link is also, it has access to the city name which the user is typing. Now once you have typed in the response, you have to convert it into a JSON format, right? Why do you need to convert it into a JSON format? Because JSON is nothing but it is a JavaScript object notation, right? And why do you need to convert it into a JSON format? Because your JS can only understand result in a JSON format, right? So we need to help the browser to do that. So I need to use dot then, right? And now whatever response I'll get from my API, I'll just do nothing. I'll just return a JSON format from it, right? So I'll do something like return response. We already have a built-in method, right? You just have to write .json here. Okay, return JSON, right? So once we do it, we now have converted the result into JSON, and now the data which will be coming from the API, we can have access to that data. Okay, so I can use now .then, and inside the result, since I now have access to the data, I can literally use the data coming from the API. Let us do one thing. Let us first of all see what the data is coming out to be. So if I do console.log data, I'll see the data in relation with the current what they call the city. Okay, so if I come up here, I type in the temperature for Delhi, I click on submit, and as you can see, I've got a response, right? So if you come up here, you see that we have all these information. I'll scroll it up, so if we have, and as you can see, this is an object, right? And you can see we have the coordinates, latitude, longitudes. We have the BTN ID. I don't know what this is, but this must be some unique ID. We have a main. Inside a main, we have, fields like GRNT level. We have the humidity, pressure, sea level, temperature. Okay, so since we are using temperature, we'll have to get access to this temperature. We have maximum temperature, minimum temperature, and all of these things. We have the name as Delhi. In SYS, we have the country code, sunrise and sunset. I am assuming this must be a time which the JS is converting it into a numerical format. We have the time zone, we have the visibility. Inside the weather, in the 0th index, we have a description, clear sky. That's what we want. We have the icon, we have the ID, we have the clear, and main, which is it is clear or it is hazy or something of that stuff. And accordingly, we also have the wind, degrees, maybe think this might be dust or something. This is the wind speed which will be actually we want to use, right? So this is how the data is looking like. So now we can because we know how do we access objects, we can use the knowledge of objects to access the data. So the first thing is what we will be needing is the description, right? So to actually get the description, I think we saw it somewhere here. If I come to this weather, so in this weather, in the 0th index, we have a description. So let us do that. So what I'll do is I'll come up here, I'll comment this out, or maybe I'll have it only. And to this, because we know how the data is stored, I can say var, maybe store the description. I can say des description equals to in the data we went into the weather, right? Okay. Right, let me just double check. Yeah, we went into the weather, and inside the 0th index we have the description. So weather, 0th index, and description. So I can mention it like something like this. So we have the data. Inside the data I need to get into the weather key, so we can use it using dot notation. So we have something called as weather, and inside the weather we have the 0th index, and inside the index again we have one more key, which is description, which is something like this, right? Similarly, we have temp, we can get temperature. So if we want to give temperature, I'll to see where the temperature is. So for temperature it is so it is inside main, right? Inside main dot temp, so it is data dot main dot temp. So I'll write data dot main dot temp, right? And after that we would want the wind speed. So let's see where the wind speed is. It must be here. Okay, so it is very straightforward. It is nothing but data dot wind dot speed. So I'll say var, I can say something like wind speed spd equals to data dot main dot, wait, what was that? Okay, data dot wind dot speed, right? Wind dot speed, right? So we now have all the access to it, and now what we can do is we can just change the inner text or the inner HTML. So I can do something like wind speed, which is something which we've already declared here, which is nothing but this wind speed. So what I can do wind speed dot inner HTML. Inner HTML helps you dynamically change the HTML of the page. You can use inner text as well, that's totally fine. And I can mention a text as well. I can say wind speed is equal to the actual wind speed, which is nothing but this object name, which is wind speed, right? So something like this. Oh, why is it like this? Expected it says expected this at this. Okay, let me do one thing. Let me first of all write the whole thing again. Let's just check the errors. Apart from wind speed, we have nothing but description and temperature. So again, as we know, oh, okay, see, this will be nothing but wind speed, because we are actually changing the wind speed. Oh, we already mentioned wind speed, that is fine. Okay, let us see the errors later on. So this will be description and this will be temperature. Description would be nothing but description is which is description like this, and wind speed is nothing, sorry, temperature is nothing but temperature like this, right? So this is to be a concat. Okay, oh, we are missing a plus sign because we need to concatenate both the results, right? So I'll have to add a plus sign as well, and we've added a plus sign, right? So now whatever the information we are having, we are just displaying it onto the web page. That is it. So now if I come up here, if I close this out, if I type in the city, let's suppose Delhi, if I click on submit, and as you can see, we are getting the, oh sorry, we need to change the text as well. Yeah, so this is nothing but the description, this is nothing but the temperature. So if I click on Delhi, if I click on submit, so we have a description which says clear sky, temperature. I assume the temperature is in kelvins, right? If you want to change the kelvins, you can subtract it by minus 270, I think minus 273.15, something like this, right? Because if you want to convert Kelvin into Celsius, you have to do something like this, right? So if I do something like this, we're getting NA. We're getting NA because temperature. Okay, let us see. Okay, let us see first of all what result are we getting, right? We're getting not NN just means not a number. That means the format is not in a number format. So we can do something like so I'll do something like, I'll come up here. So we have the current temperature. So I need to convert it into the mathematical number. So I can do something like math dot floor, and inside this math dot floor I'll add in this temperature. Right, this will help us give the temperature in a numerical format, although we'll see if there are some errors as well. So now if I come to Delhi, if I click on submit, now we get the temperature as 19 degrees, right? So if I check the temperature on my mobile phone, yeah, it is around 18 degrees, which is somewhat on the same lines. Okay, so that means now we are getting the full cut response from the API. I hope this gave you a reference of how we can use manipulation to access, add in details which comes from the back of this backend, which is from the API, right? And this is only possible because of DOM, right? Because if we do not know what DOM is, how do we access these elements? Right? We cannot access these elements, right? How do we add event listeners? We cannot add event listeners. So this is all possible with the help of DOM. Now it is your duty to add in some CSS stylings to it, right? You add in some colors, maybe some background images, some images of the clouds and all of these stuffs. You can go ahead and add these images and make it a complete project. With that being said, thank you so much for watching.